around pricing, billing, and governance. Hello, Cloud Gurus, and welcome to this section of the course. Here, we're going to be covering services around pricing, billing, and governance. This section of the course comprises the smallest portion of the exam questions at an estimated 16%, but there's still a lot to cover. For pricing, we'll cover the Application Discovery Service, which can help you determine the cost of migrating to the cloud. Then we'll look at the 4 different tiers of support plans: Basic, Developer, Business, and Enterprise. We'll talk about their cost, as well as the advantages and drawbacks of each support plan. When you're new to AWS, billing is one of the most important things you can understand. Knowing how to analyze and mitigate your budget from the very beginning can save you a lot of money in the long run. For the billing section, we'll be taking a look at budgets, which will allow you to set custom budgets and alert you when you've exceeded them. We'll look at cost and usage reports and Cost Explorer to analyze and visualize where you're spending money in AWS. Then, in the management and governance portion of this section, we'll talk about organizations, which is the foundation of multi-account management in AWS. We'll talk about Control Tower, which helps automate best practices in multi-account management. We'll talk about Systems Manager, which gives you a one-panel view of your AWS resources. We'll talk about Trusted Advisor, which can help you stick to best practices in AWS account management. We'll talk about the AWS Marketplace, which is a digital catalog of pre-built solutions. AWS Partner Network, which can help you find consultants for your complicated AWS problems. Managed Services, which can help you efficiently operate your AWS infrastructure. We'll talk about Professional Services, which is sort of a white glove service to help enterprise customers move to cloud-based operation models. AWS License Manager, which is where you can, manage licenses. And AWS Certificate Manager, which is where you can manage and generate your SSL or TLS certificates. Now, as you can see, this page is designed as a table of contents, so you can come here and click on the lesson that is most relevant to you. However, before taking the exam, I highly recommend you watch each lesson in order and then come back to this page for review. Also, while you're following along, I highly recommend you use the interactive diagram that's linked in the resources section of this lesson. This has been David Blocker, and when you're ready, come join us in the next lesson.
Welcome back. Let's talk about pricing and the total cost of ownership. Don't forget, you can follow along with me by using the webpage associated with this lesson. I've included a link for you in the resources section and in the lesson description. There are 3 fundamental drivers of cost: compute, storage, and outbound data transfer. These characteristics vary a bit based on the AWS product or service. For compute resources, you pay hourly from the time you launch a resource until the time you terminate it, unless, of course, you've made a reservation for which the cost is agreed upon upfront. Storage, this is the data you actually store in the cloud. Outbound data transfer, this is data in flight moving between systems. In most cases, there's no charge for inbound data transfer or for data transfer between other AWS services within the same region. Now, outbound data transfer is aggregated across services and then charged at the outbound data transfer rate. There's a white paper, How AWS Pricing Works. I recommend that you read it in full before the exam, and then you review it the day before the exam. There are about 43 pages, and you can click on Read White Paper to access it. Now let's talk about free offer types. There are 3 different types of free offers available depending on the service you choose. First, there's the 12 months free, and this tier offers 12 months free usage following your initial sign up to AWS. And when your 12-month free usage term expires, or if your application usage exceeds the tiers, you simply pay standard pay-as-you-go service rates. Then there's Always Free. These offers never expire and are available to all AWS customers. Then there are trials. These offers are short-term free trials starting from the date you activate a particular service. And once the trial expires, you simply pay the standard pay-as-you-go service rates. Now let's look at some of the AWS services in depth. And AWS services are priced independently. With EC2 pricing, there are 5 ways to pay for EC2 instances. On demand, you pay by the hour or by the second without prepaying. You have a savings plan. This is where you commit to compute usage measured per hour for a 1 or 3 year term. This is reserved instances. You commit to usage for 1 or 3 years and you pay regardless of usage. Spot instances. These instances only launch if spare capacity is available. And dedicated hosts, these are yours, an entire physical server just for you. Now, this pricing should be a review of what we covered in the Exploring Compute Services EC2 lesson. Now let's talk about Lambda pricing. Don't forget how you're charged when using Lambda. It's based on the number of requests, and that includes test invokes from the console. It includes the code execution time, so it's from execution start in response to events to the stop time. And 1 million, always free. You get 1 million requests per month. And again, this should be a review. We covered Lambda pricing in more detail in the Exploring Compute Services Lambda lesson. Now let's talk about pricing for S3. With S3, you pay only for the storage you use. There's no minimum fee, and prices are based on the location of your S3 bucket. It's also based on the storage class. Remember, we looked at standard and frequent access, Glacier, and more. So you pay based on the storage class you choose. You also pay based on storage. So the costs vary with the number and size of objects stored in your S3 buckets. Data transfer is also included. So the amount of data transferred out of the Amazon S3 region. Now, transfers between S3 buckets or from Amazon S3 to any service within the same AWS region are free. And requests and data retrieval. Requests made for data and the amount of requests made. And this should be a review for you. We covered S3 pricing in the Leveraging Storage Services lesson. Let's talk about RDS pricing. There are several features that drive the pricing for RDS. The first is the running clock hours. So from the time you launch a database instance until you terminate it. 2, the type of database. So database characteristics vary depending on the database engine, size, and memory class, and that all factors into the price. Storage, the purchase type. So is it an on-demand database instance or is it a reserved database instance? The database count. This is simply the number of database instances. API requests and calls. This includes calls from the Insights dashboard. Deployment type. Is it a single availability zone or is it deployed to multiple availability zones? And data transfer. Inbound data transfer is free, and there's a charge for outbound data transfer. Have you heard of the total cost of ownership? TCO or the total cost of ownership is a financial estimate that helps you understand both the direct and indirect costs of AWS. And it helps you answer questions like, how much does it cost to migrate to the AWS cloud? Or how can I reduce my total cost of ownership using AWS? And just a side note, there used to be a TCO calculator that is no longer available. However, you will see the term TCO on the exam, so understanding what it means is important. Application Discovery Service. This helps you plan migration projects to the AWS cloud by gathering information about your on-premises data centers. It helps you plan migration projects. It's used to estimate your TCO, and it works with other services to migrate servers. A few ways to reduce your TCO using AWS. Minimize capital expenditures. AWS helps you minimize large capital expenditures, which reduces your overall TCO. Number 2, utilize reserved instances. AWS provides reserved instances to help you lock in savings and reduce your TCO. And always right-size your resources. AWS helps you match the provisioning of resources to your usage needs, which helps to reduce your overall TCO. Let's see how to calculate your TCO using the pricing calculator. This is a free tool that helps you estimate your overall TCO. You're able to explore services based on your use case and find instance types that fit your needs. Let's see a quick demo. This is the AWS pricing calculator. I've included a link to it in the resources section for you. And with the pricing calculator, you create what's called an estimate, and you're able to add the various services that you want to check the costs of to that estimate, and then you can later export those estimates to a file. The first thing you do when you come to this page is you click on Create Estimate. And I'm going to show you an estimate for an EC2 instance. And so in order to do that, I have to search, let's say EC2, and there it is here. And then you click on Configure. When you click on Configure, you select the region and you can enter a description name if you want to. Here you have 2 estimate options. You have the quick estimate, and that can be used when you just want a rapid cost calculation based on minimum requirements. It doesn't provide a detailed breakdown, and it just assumes consistent utilization of your EC2 resources. Now, on the other hand, you have what's called this advanced estimate that considers details such as data transfer costs, workload types, and other options you might need, such as EBS snapshot frequency. Today, we're going to do a quick estimate. Scroll down, and underneath operating system, select the operating system that you're using or looking to use. In this case, I'm going to leave it at Linux and enter the minimum requirements for the instance. So CPUs, I'm going to leave it at 4. Memory, I'm going to leave it at 16. And notice here, it selected the optimal instance type based on my requirements. For quantity, I'm just going to leave 1 EC2 instance. For utilization, I'll leave it at 100. And now let's look at the pricing strategy. You learned about all of the different pricing strategies for EC2 instances. In this case, let's select the standard reserved instance. I don't need the convertible type, so I'll just leave it at standard reserved. And I'll reserve it for 1 year. And then for payment, I'm going to do all upfront. Here you can show calculations if you're curious. And then let's scroll down to EBS. Here you pick the desired block storage type and size. I'm just going to leave it at general purpose and the storage amount at 30. You can also expand to see the calculations here. Look here at the very bottom, the total cost is $689. So this is the upfront payment that you'll pay for the entire year. Now, let's say I did not want to do the reserved instance and I preferred on demand. Let's see how that impacts the price. If you click on demand, notice the other options are now grayed out. And let's scroll down. We'll leave everything else as is. And notice the new cost when I'm using on demand is $101.11. And notice this is your monthly charge. And so roughly that comes to 12 months. So the total price for this on-demand instance is $1,213.32. And that is actually $524.32 more than the reserved instance. So you see, you do save money when you use the standard reserved instance and you pay it all up front. Now, when you're done with this estimate, all you have to do to save it is add to my estimate, and then you'll have a new entry which can be edited, exported, and saved for later use. That is a quick look at the AWS pricing calculator. Now let's talk about the AWS Price List API. This API allows you to query the price of AWS services. You can query it using JSON or HTML, and you're able to receive price alerts when prices change. Review time. We talked about pricing, and there are three fundamental drivers of cost: compute, storage, and outbound data transfer. We talked about the TCO, the total cost of ownership. And don't forget, going into the exam, it's a financial estimate that helps you understand both the direct and indirect costs of AWS. We saw the pricing calculator, which provides an estimate of AWS fees and charges. And we wrapped up with the Price List API, which allows you to query the price of AWS services. Things to remember when studying for the exam. For the pricing calculator, don't forget that it helps you calculate the TCO. And TCO, don't forget the ways that a company can reduce their TCO. In pricing, don't forget how pricing is calculated for EC2, Lambda, S3, and RDS. And lastly, don't forget that the Price List API is one way that you can determine the cost of services. Welcome back. Let's talk about pricing and the total cost of ownership. Don't forget, you can follow along with me by using the webpage associated with this lesson. I've included a link for you in the resources section and in the lesson description. There are three fundamental drivers of cost: compute, storage, and outbound data transfer. These characteristics vary a bit based on the AWS product or service. For compute resources, you pay hourly from the time you launch a resource until the time you terminate it, unless, of course, you've made a reservation for which the cost is agreed upon upfront. Storage, this is the data you actually store in the cloud. Outbound data transfer, this is data in flight moving between systems. In most cases, there's no charge for inbound data transfer or for data transfer between other AWS services within the same region. Now, outbound data transfer is aggregated across services and then charged at the outbound data transfer rate. There's a white paper, How AWS Pricing Works. I recommend that you read it in full before the exam and then you review it the day before. Is one way that you can determine the cost. Welcome back. Let's talk about tools that help you track and understand your AWS bills. And don't forget, you can always follow along with me by using the webpage associated with this lesson. I've included a link for you in the resources section and in the lesson description. Let's start with the bigger picture. It's important to have an idea of what your monthly bill is going to be so you're not surprised. Luckily for you, AWS provides several tools to help you track your ongoing spend. First, there is budgets. Budgets allow you to set custom budgets that alert you when your costs or usage exceed your budgeted amount. This allows you to improve planning and cost control. There are actually 3 types of budgets: cost, usage, and reservation budgets. And you're able to receive budget alerts. The alerts can come in the form of an email. There's also an integration with SNS, the simple notification service, and chatbot services like Slack. Let's dig deeper into the 3 budget types. First, there is the cost budget. This is where you plan how much you want to spend on a service. There's also the usage budget, where you plan how much you want to use on one or more services. And lastly, there is the reservation budget. You can set reserved instances or savings plans, utilization, or coverage targets. If you'd like to dive deeper into creating budgets, I've included a link for you to the official AWS documentation. This information is not necessary for the exam, but it's very important so you keep track of your monthly spend. Budgets in the real world. Let's say you want to monitor your free tier usage so you don't incur unwanted costs. Well, AWS budgets allow you to do that, and you can monitor your free tier usage to ensure you don't accidentally exceed free tier limits. And you can set up an alert notification, and I'll show you how to do that in a quick demo to be notified whenever your bill is approaching a particular dollar amount. Let's see how to set up a billing and budget alert. Let's look at creating a cost budget using AWS Budget. I've navigated to the AWS Management Console, and I'm going to search for budgets. Click it. And this is going to bring you to the AWS Budgets dashboard. Notice there aren't any budgets. To quickly create a custom budget, click Create a Budget. On this screen, there are several budgets to choose from. In our example today, we're going to create a cost budget because that will monitor costs against a specified amount, and you're able to receive alerts when your forecast or your actual costs go over that threshold amount that you've set. Now let's click Set Your Budget. The first thing we're going to do is give our budget a name. Let's call it Monthly Budget. And this name is important because this name must be unique across your account, and it will also be the subject of the email alert that you receive. Now we'll enter the period. There are several options: daily, monthly, quarterly, or annually. We're going to create a monthly budget. We're going to make this a recurring budget, meaning it will renew on the first day of every monthly billing period. We'll leave the defaulted start month. Now let's specify our monthly budget. You have 2 options. You have a fixed budget or a monthly budget planning option. I'm going to leave it at fixed because I want to create a budget that tracks against a single monthly dollar amount. And that dollar amount I'm going to enter here under budgeted amount, and I'm going to say $50. If you scroll down, you have several additional budget parameters. You can filter on things like a linked account, a region, an instance type, and more. And just know the options that show up here are based on the budget type that you selected. So we selected cost budget, and so that's why we're seeing this list. If you scroll down, you'll see advanced options. Here you can aggregate costs or include costs related to refunds, credits, reservation fees, support charges, discounts, and more. I'm just going to leave all of the defaults. Then I'm going to click on Configure Thresholds. Now this defines when you'll get the alert. Here, under Define Your Budget Threshold, we're going to set the threshold based on the actual cost. You can also select forecasted cost. And so here, the threshold amount, let's say 50% of the budgeted amount. So this is saying when I've spent half of my budget, send me an alert. Then here, you're able to add email recipients. Because this is a test, I'm just going to put a fake email account. You can also enter an Amazon SNS topic, or you can integrate with chatbots. So that's an integration with Slack or with Amazon Chime. For now, I'm just going to leave the email alert. Click Confirm Budget. This screen, you just look at the budget details. It's a monthly budget, the start date, there's no end date, the budgeted amount, and some of the advanced options, and my threshold, and this looks great, so I'm going to click Create. And that's how easy it is to create a budget. And next we have the Cost and Usage Report. This is a single location for accessing the most comprehensive information about your AWS costs and usage. And this is the place you're going to go if you receive a huge bill and you need to figure out what's going on. It actually includes down to the exact instance ID what is running up your bill. You're able to download a detailed and comprehensive report. It lists usage for each service category, and you're able to aggregate usage data on a daily, hourly, or monthly level. The Cost and Usage Report in the real world. This allows you to view the most granular data about your AWS bill. It allows you to deep dive into your AWS cost and usage data, and once you set it up, you can download the report using Amazon S3. And next we have Cost Explorer. It allows you to visualize your costs over time. You're able to view the past 12 months, and you're even able to forecast for up to 3 months in the future. Cost Explorer in the real world. It allows you to analyze your EC2 usage over the past 7, 30, or 60 days. If you're considering your options for savings plans, AWS Cost Explorer can analyze your EC2 usage over the past 7, 30, or 60 days. Let's see a quick demo of Cost Explorer. Cost Explorer allows you to view and analyze your costs and usage. I've navigated to the AWS Management Console, and I'm going to search for Cost Explorer, and then I'm going to click on it. This actually brings me to the Cost Management Dashboard, and it shows the current month costs and the forecasted month-end costs. So right now, current month sitting at $49.53, and month-end forecasted costs $100.86. Over here on the left-hand side, you'll see Cost Explorer. Click on it. When this screen comes up, you can view data for up to the last 12 months. You can also forecast how much you're likely to spend. Here, I'm going to leave the default at 6 months, and I'm going to leave it at monthly. Notice it's grouped by service, but you can also group it by linked account, region, instance type, usage, and more. Let's scroll down and actually look at this graph, or let's explore the costs. Here, there's a charge for registration, domain name registration. Down here, this green represents a refund. The yellow represents S3 costs, and we can kind of scroll over. And this pink represents CloudWatch costs, S3 again, Secrets Manager, and other charges. So this is a very detailed view of the charges across this AWS account. If you scroll down, you're able to see that same data represented as text. And you're also able to download it as CSV if you want to import it into a spreadsheet program to do further analysis. A few other neat features, you can change it from a bar chart to, let's say, a line graph or a stack graph. So this is a quick look at using Cost Explorer to analyze your costs and usage. Cost allocation tags. Tags are useful for tracking spend. They allow you to label resources using a key and value pair, resources like an EC2 instance, an S3 bucket. And tags also allow you to track costs via the cost allocation report. Review time. We talked about budgets. Budgets allow you to set custom budgets that alert you when your costs or usage exceed your budgeted amount. We talked about the cost and usage report, which contains the most comprehensive set of cost and usage data. We looked at Cost Explorer that allows you to visualize and forecast your costs and usage over time. And we wrapped up with cost allocation tags. Tags are useful for tracking your spend. Things to remember going into the exam. Budgets. Don't forget, you can be alerted when your usage exceeds a defined threshold using budgets. The cost and usage report. Remember that report provides the most detailed set of AWS costs and usage data available. And with Cost Explorer, don't forget, that's the service that helps you visualize and forecast spending. And we wrapped up with cost allocation tags. And don't forget, you're able to tag resources, and that can help you track your spend. When you're ready, please join me in the next lesson. Welcome back. Let's talk about governance services. We'll explore ways to consolidate billing for multiple AWS accounts and govern a multi-account AWS environment. Don't forget that you can follow along with me by using the web page associated with this lesson. I've included a link for you in the resources section and in the lesson description. Let's talk about the bigger picture. How do governance and management services fit in the bigger picture? Governance and management services help you maintain control over cost, compliance, and security across all of your AWS accounts. Let's start with organizations. Organizations allow you to centrally manage multiple AWS accounts under one umbrella. You can create